Okay. I believe we are recording. We're live now, so we are here with Susan Chin. Um, uh, Works for the Political Action Committee for DC 37. Also, a friend of mine. I know her and her husband for a long time now, and in other worlds of politics, but now certainly as brother and sister in arms with DC 37. Um, the reason why I'm interviewing you today is I'm in a course with the Murphy School with CUNY, and that is sponsored by DC37. And we're part of our final project is to interview people in the labor movement, preferably people in DC37. So we're here with you, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Susan Chin. I'm Assistant Director in the Political Action Department. I have been with DC 37 for about 24 and a half years. I started my career, I worked for a lobbyist first, and then I moved over to DC 37. So currently I do the city lobbying for DC 37. And in these fiscal crises, it's a really challenging time because the city is going through some serious financial challenges, which have been brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are working on the city, state, and federal level, especially the federal level, to make sure that funding comes to the city and is allocated to programs that have been severely cut, such as education, healthcare, and safety net programs.
Okay. Now you mentioned you were DC 37 for about 24 years, and before that you with Montalbano Initiatives, right? And that was
Yeah.
Vincent Montalbano's shop, I guess.
Yes.
So maybe
Yes.
he was also the political director of DC 37 in the 1980s, correct?
Yes. Correct.
Okay.
So I worked with Vinny out of school, and then I worked with Vinny for a year and a half, and then I went over to DC 37. I started as a political analyst, working with the state person who was the associate director. And then I started working also with the city lobbyist at the time. And then we went through some changes. And then I basically started doing the city hall lobbying full time.
Okay. So let's talk about that. So you work for DC 37. You work in the Political Action Committee, and you mentioned lobbying. So there are different types of politics for my classmates or some of the other viewers that don't know that. Tell us a little bit difference. Like there's political action in the sense trying to get someone elected, maybe that a union endorses. And then there's the other side, which you mentioned, which is lobbying, which is sort of trying to get action, right? And maybe tell us a little bit about that as far as DC 37 is concerned in your role.
So DC 37 has many components. We also, as you had mentioned, we also endorse candidates. So we have something called the screening committee, which is composed of local presidents of DC 37. So there's several different presidents who sit on the committee, and we have a chair who's Donald Nesbitt, who is the vice president of Local 372, who represents school workers. He is the chairman currently, and he sits on the committee with a myriad of local presidents who represent locals in DC 37, and they screen candidates who request an appointment for to be endorsed by DC 37. So that's one component where we do endorsements, and with that, once we endorse a candidate comes membership involvement, whereas we do mailings, we do phone banking, we do canvassing, and we do GOTV activities for candidates we endorse. The other component is lobbying, which we do for on the state and city level. We have AFSCME, which is our parent company, who does lobbying on the federal level, but we do city and state lobbying. to ensure that legislation is union friendly and is beneficial to our members. And then we also, a big component that I do is budget, to make sure that is in programs that restore or increase staffing levels to agencies so our members can continue working and servicing New Yorkers.
Interesting. That'll be obviously very valuable going forward. In these tough economic times, we as a DC 37 member, as an essential employee, I'm working out of the TLC, and I'm working in our facility. There's a lot of officers there that are working, and all the other workers that work out of our facility. They're concerned about their job. There's talk about giving them pay raises or giving them some hazard pay related to COVID-19. But many are concerned. We just like to hold on to our jobs. That may be where you come in, right?
Yes, so we are working on many different levels. I just got off a staff call, and we talked about we're pushing hard on the congressional side. We can't do this without congressional support. There are a couple of bills at the city council level which require funding, which at this point the city does not have. And we also anticipate a second round of cuts coming from the state within the next week or so. So we can't do it without congressional funding, and we are pushing Congress and our two senators to push the president to on another stimulus package for aid to localities and to get more funding into education and healthcare. And as a member, you will be hearing about our push through AFSCME to get this funding that's crucially needed in New York.
Hmm. Let's take one step back and just what are some of the influences that had you decide you wanted to take this on as a career? Um, you work with Vinny, you said early on. Was he an inspiration? Was it something in school? I know you went to Hunter College on your undergraduate, and did something happen in Hunter College? Where was it along the line, or what was it that inspired you to take this on?
So the first day I walked into Hunter, I saw they used to have these screens that talked about different programs that they had available. And one of the programs that they had was a summer in Washington. And I said I was, that caught my eye, and I was, geared toward that since, my first day as a freshman. So I met with the professor who ran the program, and he said that you had to be a sophomore and going into your junior year. So I worked toward my credits in order to get involved in the program. I also did an internship prior to that at the DA's office, political internship, working like 2.5 days a week, and then also going to school. But then when I went to DC, I ended up getting a position there with the City of Washington office, which does lobbying for New York City in DC. So they have a state office and a federal office. And there is where I really got into the lobbying, getting involved, and, learning how to move elected officials to positions that would benefit New York City. So then after graduation, somebody told me about the job with Vinny, referred me, met with Vinny, worked with Vinny. Vinny had a small shop. It was just me and him.
Mhm.
And I was young, so he said, kid, it's me and you. You need to move on to another career. And it just so happened there was a position open at DC 37. So he thought that would be a good fit for me and referred me. I met with the people there, and I was able to get a position and have been working there since. We used to have somebody who worked in pensions, and he always said, everybody thinks you're going to stay for a year and then move on. 24 years later, I'm still at DC 37. I've been through many leadership changes, but what drives me is, and it sounds corny, but helping people. Members just, we realize come to work and just want to work, provide for their families, and go on with their lives. don't realize the components needed in order to get better pay, better benefit packages, and that's what we're there for. And one of the lessons I did learn walking in there, Jean Bruno was the political director at the time, and he local has one member, or if the local has 25,000 members, you represent them all the same. And I've always carried that with me. And, it's harder for the smaller locals to lobby for themselves because they don't have the manpower or people power to do it. But, we're their voice, whether it's in City Hall, Albany, or in DC. We work with everybody all the same. And, right now, working from home is challenging because, to mobilize people to come and testify. So City Council started their budget hearings. They are bifurcated because there aren't as many hearings. I'm trying to get like the local presidents or the representatives to come out and talk about their issues and their budget concerns, because at this crucial time, everybody needs to be heard. And I always tell people this, that, I'm one person at City Hall. I live in one district. There are 51 council districts, and you represent a whole myriad of members. And I need you to come out because, the electorate is important. And, what I learned under the Bloomberg administration was getting local presidents and members out onto the steps of City Hall and starting a conversation with the council members, because, once they say, I live in your district and I vote for you, that starts a whole other dialogue that I can't have with certain members. And then they talk about their jobs, and, it becomes personal because people say, I bring my kids to the zoo, I bring my kids to the, botanical gardens, I bring my kids to the libraries. So then they start a whole different conversation. But my job is to, basically um, that people pay attention to our issues. And I have the presence at City Hall that many locals can't have because they're out there servicing the members. So that's, my contribution to getting legislation and budget done with DC 37.
You bring up an interesting point there, and you talk about trying to get members involved in part of the process and getting them to the steps of City Hall, getting them to testify at hearings, to try and make them part of the process, really to organize them. And one of the things you mentioned is sort of that difficulty. I think that has come up certainly in our class discussions. Everyone there is mostly a member of DC 37, or these are union members that make up our class. I'm a shop steward at my facility, and getting people involved just in my shop, or getting people involved to do stuff, is sometimes very difficult. And that brings us to another point, something else we discussed in our class, which is that union membership in many ways is dropping, on at least in the private sector unions. And obviously we're a public sector, public employee sector union. And it didn't suffer as bad as the private unions. But maybe you can speak to something about that, and maybe tie in something I heard Vinny say on an interview with Ronnie Eldridge. This was about 3 years ago. This was a former city councilwoman on her show. It's a CUNY TV show, and that aired around November 2017. He also said the same thing. And what he was talking about to her, and they both discussing this, union membership sort of dropping off, certainly in the private sector. And he related some of his concerns that at the time, this is 2017, 40% of many union members, that I didn't even know the number was that big. I haven't really researched that figure, may have voted for Donald Trump, and how this poses a problem from his perspective for the Democratic Party, at least. And maybe not speak to that, but certainly from the perspective of unions, that unions are trying to get their members to take seriously their membership and direct their votes in a particular way. And what do you have to say about this? That that they're maybe losing members, and then where the Democratic Party had such a strong share of their vote, if that vote is going other places, what's really happening right now? And what are the unions, or certainly DC 37 other unions, doing to try and work with that? I know that's a lot. I know there's a lot of questions there, but
Okay, I'm sorry, Liam. Just 1 second. I need to tell my daughter she needs to lower her cell
yeah,
phone.
sure,
1 second.
absolutely. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So,
I just
the
want to say
first
that's this
piece.
is part of the sort of the Zoom life, and all the Zoom meetings. When my kids come in, or the dog comes in, the door opens up, or Christine yells at me, I have to sort of excuse the people we're talking about. That's really part of what we're dealing with right now. So
Exactly. It's
yeah,
all on top of everything else. And then when Russ is on a call too, and it gets challenging at times.
yeah.
So the first piece is about union membership. So I don't know if you're aware, but we have unified with one of our sister affiliates, Local 1707.
Hmm.
They- Daycare workers, and they have some private sector unions in there. They're smaller locals, but we took them on, and Henry was able to negotiate a very good package for them in terms of raises and contracts, because at the time um, they were without a contract for many years, and Henry brought them up to a very good wage and benefits package that they were entitled to for a long time, but weren't able to get from the city. So one of the pieces as a political action department, we mostly focus on public sector unions. Unifying with 1707 has brought another perspective, which you mentioned. There were some private sector pieces in it. And yes, there is a loss in membership in private sector. We are working now, and DC 37 has a program called the Next Wave, which trying to bring union members. I'm sorry. So the Next Wave, bringing in younger members who are 35 and under, and trying to get them involved. What I noticed was, and it's unfortunate, a lot of our older retirees who were so active when I first came on board over 20 years ago have either passed away, have moved away, or have become inactive for one reason or another. And we're just trying to replenish that activism base. And younger people are, are are enjoying the benefits that the retirees built up over the years. They knew what was at stake. They built it up. That's why they were so involved. They would come to the union every day. They did meetings. They did phone banking for us. Younger people have other challenges, as you well know. They have families. They want to go to school. They work. They take care of the parents, take care of the kids. So to get them involved, it's more difficult. So we're talking about now possibly virtual phone banks, texting programs, uh, updating our IT to make it more manageable and more accessible to the younger members to get involved. We did a mailing to get younger people involved in our PAC meetings. Donald, as our chair of political action, was a next waiver and got a lot of his members involved. So that's one piece. I'm sorry, Liam, what was the second question?
That I think that handled a lot of it. I guess the other part was that in terms of a share of the vote, that some of the vote is, at least according to Vinny, in the last presidential election, has shifted Republican, and he was lamenting that, from his perspective, that the as closely aligned with the Democratic Party, that the sort of the Democratic Party is losing a share of a vote they had. And he didn't really speak to it too much. I mean, his position was in the interview that the unions aren't organizing or educating their members enough on how important it is. There's another side, and I'm not taking a position. There's another side that to say that says the Democratic Party does not share all the interest that some of the union members have, there's another article I read recently that talks about some of the people that are involved in some industries where there's environmental concerns, whether it's digging through shale or whether it's oil pipeline. In some of these cases, throughout the United States, not just DC 37. This is a bigger conversation that I think he was having with Ronnie Eldridge, but that the Democratic Party is sort of having a problem with that, and maybe talk to that because like I said, there was that article that said that's the case. You're seeing that in parts of Pennsylvania and other areas, not so much here in New York and with DC 37. It's a Democratic town, but any problems? You said you speak with Congress members, maybe upstate or other areas. Maybe just speak to that a little bit.
So as a union, we do have to work with both sides of the aisle, and especially when, the Republicans control the state Senate. As you're well aware, we endorsed Marty Golden many times in his reelection bids, Andrew Lanza, and I personally have worked on Republican campaigns that we endorsed, such as Frank Padovan and Surf Maltese. So, it is challenging because when we announced that we endorse Republicans, we would get pushback. And we would say, listen, and this is what I say all the time, and I say it publicly. Sometimes Democrats do take advantage of the fact that we will endorse them, but listen, we keep a scorecard. We make sure that their interests are our members' interests. We try to work with them on bills and budgets that we feel are harmful to our members. Again, you always can't win 100% of these battles, but we try. And all Republicans are not bad. And like I'm sorry, that's Ross in the background laughing. Oh, he has to
Can you
say
see
hello.
us?
Hey,
Yes,
hello,
yes.
Ross.
Liam, you're breaking my heart, buddy. You're breaking my heart.
How you doing?
Please edit that.
Yeah, all right.
Oh, good, Papa.
So, and I say all Democrats aren't good either. So it is challenging to, Megan, please. It is challenging to, because of the fact that we are a Democratic organization mostly, to let members know that, we will work with an elected official, Democrat, Republican, working families, independent, as long as they have our members' interests at heart. And it's very difficult to try to explain to members how politics affects them day to day. And we just had that discussion on our conference call about how, some people aren't getting their unemployment checks, how some people didn't get their stimulus checks. And they're like, you know what? Why am I going to vote this year for Congress or the legislature if I'm not getting my money and I'm laid off? What are they doing for me? So we have to explain that, if we work with these electeds to help get them elected, we are able to have an open dialogue with them. And, the door is open to us. And, if we get in on the ground floor, they're more apt to come to us. And there are some electeds that we have endorsed on the city and state level that were underdogs in their races. We, when they came to screen, their positions were aligned with DC 37. We supported them. They won. And when there are concerns, they do come to us and they say, how does this impact your membership? And then we let them know. And, there are voices in the room. And I tell the members this, listen, I stop at the door at City Hall. I cannot be in negotiations, whether it's for budget, whether it's for legislation. This is why we need the politicians to support us and to go in there and say, this is what DC 37 is for or against. And, I do have good friends in the room, and they do tell me who really is in there fighting for us. I can have a politician tell me to my face, yeah, I'm in there fighting, but when push comes to shove and they're in the room, I also have eyes and ears that will tell me that no, that person didn't support you. They may tell you yes, but they didn't, and they let you just fall by the wayside. And that's important to the institution, because I need to know who I can and can't trust to carry our issues, in the city, and as well as the state. And we have to have these relationships with elected officials to carry the budget and legislation for us. And we're having these discussions also with these COVID-19 pieces of legislation that's happening on the city and state level as well. And again, our partners are with them to get more federal funding. So
You
the
mentioned,
challenges is to get more young people in, and we are trying to explain to them, yes, we all have a lot of things going on, but your benefits, your salary, it's all political, and it's all negotiated.
and so what you're
We're
saying,
fortunate we have an ED that's politically connected with the city and state, and he's heard. He's on the task force. He's one of the labor leaders on the task force to open up New York City, and that's huge and important because of the fact of the membership he represents. It's such a wide array. And again, Henry's one person in the room, but he needs political power behind him. The members hold political power, whether it's voting, whether it's calling elected officials, and I always said this. One council member taught me the biggest lesson. She said to me, "You're a nice girl. You come here every day and you lobby different issues with me." Yes, but I need to see your people. I need to know that these are their concerns. And my colleagues need to know this is what's important to them. Because in
would
the
you,
end, they're the ones who vote for us.
and would you
I'm
say that
sorry.
that is one of the, I was going to say, would you say that that is one of the toughest challenges facing the union right now, is getting young people involved and getting our union members involved going forward, educating them? Would you say that that is probably one of the more difficult and challenges facing you as an organizer right now?
It is. So we're partnering with the divisions. The divisions are what the locals fall under, and new member orientations and organizing. So when they have new member orientations, we like to get invited. So we talk about politics, involvement, getting people involved. So we've been fortunate in getting younger people involved. There are some people who want to be involved, but they don't know how to get their foot in the door on involvement. So we have been able, and we also partner up with the Next Wave group. So one of the locals, our newer locals that came out of 375, there's a local president. She's a young woman. She's in her early 20s, and we were excited to see that because she's able to bring in new members. She talks to the members. She's a next waiver, and she's telling them what's at stake. Again, our retirees fought so hard for the benefits and the pay wages, and the young people have to carry on, because without that, they will fall by the wayside, and the labor movement is their voice, and we don't want to go back to the days of not having a voice at the table, because struggle is challenging and it's real nowadays, and we're going to see that going ahead in the next couple of years while we face these budget deficits on the city and state level. And if the young people think it's tough now, it's going to be rougher in the next couple of years. And we are also talking to our new locals of 1707, letting them know what's at stake as well. And they are very interested in getting involved. and at the rallies. And you know what elected officials like to see, and you know this, Liam,
Mhm.
participation
Mm.
by constituents and member organizations, because it speaks to them. They're voters. And you know, they have families. And we always say it's not the member, it's not one vote, it's a household vote. So there are households that range from one member to 6 to 7 members, and that's a voting block that we rely on and that we can count on when it's election time.
Mm. And I guess that leads into another question, which is, you talk about the current situation we're in, this sort of crisis, and what's going to be a budget crisis, economic, how that relates to labor, but maybe tie that into, look, you've been with DC 37 now for maybe 24 years. So one of my questions was, what is sort of the hardest struggle you've been through? It may be right now. I guess that's why I'm prefacing it that way. Or is there anything in the past that you can compare to what we're gonna be going through, what we're going through now, and how does that sort of past illuminate, your path as a political action person in this time?
So, you know, during the Bloomberg days, they were challenging because there were tons of layoffs. Um, he would say that the city is in a fiscal crisis, but in the same time, he would also sign contracts with outside people, corporations, which cost the city a lot more money. But he said because of the fact that the city wasn't paying benefits, it was cheaper, and you know, basically, it was only for X amount of time. Whereas you hire city workers, you know, they're on the payroll, they use the health and welfare benefits, you got to pay pension costs. But we say if you once you hire people to the city, they're invested. It's more than a job. They look at it as a career, and it provides for families and communities. So it is challenging. I think times is challenging. It's worse now because of the fact this is a nationwide problem. And you know, we're fortunate, and the news has been talking about de Blasio talking about furloughs and layoffs. But de Blasio has said to us that layoffs are the last um, piece that he will implement if push comes to shove. But he has asked city agencies for savings, and they've done a great job in doing that without cutting lines and cutting people, doing furloughs and layoffs. So we're fortunate in that aspect. But again, the federal government has to come forward with some form of stimulus package to localities. I think this is our 5th stimulus package, but it really has to be targeted more to localities because of the fact that we're looking at additional cuts to education and healthcare. Even though, you know, healthcare is looked upon as a safety net piece, you know, Medicaid has been decimated over the years, and it continues to be decimated and will be decimated as state cuts come down. So, you know, one of the questions at the hearings was, you know, has the city administration looked at Bloomberg's plans for contingencies and budget crisis? Listen, the union has taken on so much. We have sacrificed a lot. You know, Henry has authored many white papers offering savings. This administration has implemented some of those with the insourcing, but that is on hold now because of what's going on. But it's going to be a tough couple of years going ahead, and membership involvement is more important now than ever. The state elections are coming up, congressional elections are coming up, and 2021 citywide races are coming up. So members really need to get involved and get their families involved, because the next several years will define how New York City can, you know, make their way out of the situation.
And one of my that brings me sort of to the end of this, and maybe one of my final questions is, talk about educating educating people about unions. We were talking about that, or getting people to the table, trying to organize them, and helping them to understand. You know, for people like me, my father was very active in TWU. He was inspired by Mike Quill and some of these firebrands, and I came across, interestingly enough, in some of my mother's belongings of the day, old dues cards from my grandfather, my father's father, who was a longshoreman, and you had stuff from the 1950s from the Longshoremen's Association, and a lot of these cool dues cards, 1957, 1960. So in my family, at least, I was educated about these struggles and the strikes and a lot of the stuff that workers did, during that time period. But that's where it came from for me. And now I've been involved in politics, and I work now, and I'm taking this course. But one of the things we talk about in the course, and even in some of our union meetings, is how people are educated about uh, the labor movement. So what I'd like to ask you is, where did you come to learn about the labor movement? Other than working for DC 37, did you learn about it in school? One of the things we do talk about is there isn't too much labor history. And I've taken political science courses and involved in politics, but other than from my own family, learning about it, my father's sort of activity, I might not have got it. They don't really teach labor history as sometimes part of political science courses. Maybe it's and there's not that much out there, especially on public sector unions like DC 37. There really isn't, even from an academic standpoint. So on that note of talking about getting people educated and involved, talk a little bit about your education, how that came to be, where you picked it up.
So my grandmother was part of ILGWU, Lady Garment Workers, and it was challenging because, working at a Chinatown facility, as you know, there was, summers were so hot. People were crammed in there. Sometimes they would lock the door. There were unsafe working conditions. But as an immigrant and as an older woman coming here, there weren't many options back then. So she did that. But when the factory did close, she was able to apply for unemployment. And, when she didn't get her wages, the union was there to get back wages and fight back wages for her. My parents were not in the labor movement. They were private business owners. So I saw them, they had to provide their own private health insurance for the family. Um, you know, uh, Health benefits, we were fortunate, we were healthy, so we really didn't have to go to the doctor often. But, prescriptions and things like that, cost money. It was out of pocket. So, when I talk to people in the private sector, they always say it's amazing that people in the labor movement they get pensions and healthcare. I always say it's a trade-off. They don't get like corporate money. They make lower wages, but they realize what they get in pension and healthcare benefits is what makes up the salaries. And when they retire, the retirees say it, their pensions help supplement their social security checks. And, they have their health benefits. And one of the pieces at 372, one of our locals in the schools, they're part-time workers, the lunch aides, the crossing guards, but when they retire, they get a full-time benefit of healthcare for themselves and their spouse. Um, I'm not aware of any other local or union that has part-time workers that offer full-time benefits when they retire. And that is so key to these members and their families. So I'll give you an example. So a couple of years back, what happened was because of the fact they offered full-time benefits for these workers, that fund started to deplete itself. And something had to be done. And one of the options were not to offer the spouse health benefits or prescription drugs. And this was a huge issue because as a retiree, as you get older, you get sicker and you rely on more drugs. And I had a woman come up to me and say, my husband's drugs cost $1,000 a month. What are we going to do? And it breaks your heart to hear this, because these people worked all their lives, and they relied on the fact that they were going to get this benefit. So 372 was able to fortify the fund and provide that benefit back. It took a couple of months, but we worked and able to get the spouses back on health coverage and pension. I'm sorry, not pension, health coverage. And it meant so much to that membership. But again, we had to organize them to get them involved, to say, hey, we need these funds, and Henry was able to negotiate to get more funding put into this benefit package. And it was so key to this group of members, and it was so great to get them covered again. But I saw the struggles as somebody, parents who were not unionized, how my grandmother got benefits, working under the union, and now working for a union. And I'm not saying this because I work for a union, but it's tremendous. And again, struggles, you don't know what you have until you lost it. And I keep telling the younger folks, listen, you don't want to lose something, because once you lose it, to gain it back, the struggle is going to be 10 times harder. The fight's going to be 10 times harder. So you know what? The time that you put in now is going to be so, because you're leaving that legacy to your kids. And sometimes it's harder to talk to some people. They're like, oh, nobody does anything for me. And I'm like, listen, it's about the greater good. And in ways, they do impact you. You just don't see it immediately. But it takes time. And we talk to our members whenever we can, and we do outreach to them. We also did a piece on Hustle, which is our text program to the members. We did a wellness check on them, and then we're getting involved in census now. And we got some pushback from some members. They're saying, listen, people are dying during COVID, why are you asking me about the census? And we're like, listen, we're doing a wellness check. We're checking on you and your family. But you know what? The census is important, because if we don't get counted, we're not going to get funds that the New York needs at this point. And you know what? It takes 5-10 minutes out of your life. But that 5-10 minutes has impact on the next 10 years of your life. So you know what? Instead of watching something mindless on TV, or going on Facebook or doing something else, take the time and invest in yourself, your family, and New York, and make sure we get money put in, so we can get education, transportation, money, infrastructure money into New York City and state. That's so crucially needed now.
Yeah, no, that is very important. To have people participate in that. And I know that that's a big push, not only the DC 37 or the unions are making, but really all elected officials across the board, because it has to do with not only funding, but as with proportional representation. So the way districts are represented up in Albany or in Washington, DC, has a lot to do with the population of their particular district. So it's very important. It spans any kind of partisan effort, and really goes to the need for all elected officials and all unions and all groups that are concerned with that. And one last thing, I found that you were named one of the 30 most beautiful people by the Public Employee Press.
Well, actually, it was in City and State when before it became
Right.
it was City Hall before it became City and State.
Yes.
So, and then the PEP just boosted that.
Mhm. Good.
No, go ahead, Liam.
No, go ahead. You were going to say, yeah.
Going back to what you said earlier, we do have members that are green card holders, and a lot of them say, listen, I can't vote.
Mm-hmm.
But we say, listen, we have a citizenship program. We're one of the unions that offer this program to our members to get their citizenship papers. All they do are pay the fees to become a citizen. So we provide filling out the opportunity to fill out paperwork, the lawyers to go with them. So DC 37 is unique in programs we offer. We offer, an education benefit that you're participating in, as well as your colleagues in the class in the Murphy Institute. We have DC 37 classes so people can advance their careers, and we also have had for tests, a civil service test. We have our MELS program. Are you aware of our MELS program, Municipal Employee Legal Services?
Ah, I should know, but I have to say,
Oh, come on, Liam, you got to know about that.
look, I will say this. I am taking advantage of the Murphy Institute and as well as the shop steward class. Although I will say that I did not, it was a three-part, the class that I took. I was not able to make the third part because my shift was going back and forth. Or now I'm back to overnight. So even today, I've only had a few hours rest, and we're still working. But so I do want to take advantage of that again, shop steward and some of the other classes. But go
So
ahead, tell me.
MELS,
Mhm.
yeah, MELS, anybody can take. So I always say we have lawyers for everything but criminal. If consumer debt, matrimonial, wills. I always tell people, listen, I hope you don't go bankrupt. I hope you don't foreclose on your house. You don't divorce your spouse. But the one benefit I tell everybody to take advantage of, draw up the will. We have seen so many members come in and they don't, their family, their surviving family don't have wills, or they have an old will. So you got to make sure your beneficiaries are up to date and everything else. Because of the fact, and it makes you think when you get the questionnaire. So I got the questionnaire. Several different things happened where I said it was time to do my own will, and this is a benefit that comes with being a dues paying member. So definitely take advantage. And the questionnaire goes into what would you like to leave to people, your family, who would you like to leave it to? It's basically, your last wishes put into paper. And I always tell people, and we have MELS come and talk at our community association meetings. That's another way to get our members involved. If they can't come to the union, we bring the union to them in certain high density areas. I cover Bed-Stuy. I had a colleague covering Crown Heights, Co-op City, Harlem. So we bring the union to them. And, we offer these benefits. And when we tell the members this, they're like, oh, I'm not aware. I'm like, go to the website. We have a Facebook page. These are programs that are there for you. So Henry was able to negotiate $100 additional credit for each member to take education classes. So the union is more than just health benefits and pension to people. We also offer, continuing education, and these programs, like if you get jammed up with, consumer credit piece or things like that, a housing issue, if you're getting evicted, we want to know about it. We want to help you. And we talk about it all the time. It's so crucial that the members use these programs. So it's just, and again, political power comes into this, because if we don't push the pressure points, we won't get the funding for these programs. So.
No, that's a good point. I have to admit I have not done my will, but that is a very valuable asset to have. And speaking of assets, one of the things that union workers may fight their whole life is to buy a house or to gain some sort of asset. And then it's so crucial that when you pass away, you make sure that's handled without the least amount of burden on your family. So if any of my fellow students or anyone else that watches this, I definitely implore you to take advantage of it. I certainly will be, and I admit I didn't know, and I haven't done it yet. And you never know when you're gonna go. And
Exactly. So
I've had people. Yeah.
You mentioned housing. So we have a first-time homebuyer program.
Mm.
So we have a housing specialist in-house that you meet with, and you talk about. They look at your financing. Some people have bad credit. They help you repair your credit. and they look at options for you, and whether it's a co-op, a condo, or a house. And they help you work towards that, and we work with different lenders. Not so much big traditional lenders, because some people's credit is not as good as others. So they have an array of banks that they work with, who will work with our members. And this first time homebuyer program is excellent. And it was, again, championed under Henry Garrido, because what you pay in rent, you could be paying a mortgage, and it's your own. So we have many good stories as well. So that's another program I'd like to let you
Let me
know
just
about.
jump in there. You mentioned the home bar. That was something I was aware of, and I think some of the other students in my class that actually came up in a discussion where one of the students said, "Look, many of the members are. Well, and it's wonderful that we have the opportunity. We talked about building wealth, and everybody should try to own their house if they can. But one of the things that we talked about in class was, in some cases, some people cannot even afford rent right now. So while owning a house is a wonderful benefit, just sort of as an aside, they brought up the fact that being able to pay the rent, especially now in COVID, are there any programs with DC 37 that help people sort of manage that burden, or help educate them or get them into a place if they're having problem with rent? I know there's no particular subsidy, but what do you do? Because the rent is too damn high, and it's hard for a lot of New Yorkers.
So, it's unfortunate. We do have homeless members who work every day, who have to leave the homeless shelter, go to work, and then hopefully they get another room when they return. So we understand there are challenges out there, and again, we have MELS that will work with members on consumer debt and credit. We have the housing unit within MELS to avoid evictions. Unfortunately, when you become a home buyer, we don't represent you to evict the tenants. It's contrary to what we do. But we have various different programs, and we always tell our members, listen, talk to your shop steward. If the shop steward is not aware, call your division, call your rep. We have programs, and we can direct them to these programs. We also have a program called PSU, which is our Personal Services Unit. There are people who have issues that lead to homelessness, whether it's drug or alcohol, mental health. We have counselors that provide counseling to the members, and they meet with them, and they talk to them. There are times where our members get into job jeopardy for one reason or another because of what's going on personally. And, the reps who go in there negotiate with the city and say, listen, we'll get our people into counseling to provide them these services to get them the help that they need. And it's crucial, because, and a lot of them, benefit from this because it's the help that they didn't know where to seek. And, if their job is on the line, and their family relies on them for their paycheck, they realize, if they lose their job, they will have nothing. So PSU is also a crucial component at the union that we offer.
All right, that's good. I really appreciate it. I think we're wrapping up here. I think after an hour, my Zoom turns into a pumpkin. I don't have the full account, so I don't know what happens. But one final, and it's really been great, and I want to thank you for your time. I know you're very busy right now, and I want to thank you also. As a union member, aside from we're friends, but for all that you do to help us with those benefits, and maybe it's a thankless job sometimes. A lot of the political action stuff doesn't, people don't really appreciate a lot of what you do. And I think you've had some time here to explain some of that, and, all the different people that you have to deal with, not only the union members, leadership, but also all the different elected officials at the federal, state, and city level, their staffers. So there's a lot that goes on to sort of try to maintain and protect those benefits. And I want to say thank you. And the last question I had is on personal one. Ross sort of jumped in there. He's a longtime friend of mine, and I know he had some political comment. But you talked about how families talk together and households vote together sometimes. But in your household, sometimes that might be different. And do you guys always get along? Do you cancel each other out sometimes? I know how Ross feels. Yeah.
We do cancel each other out. People say we have an interesting household. And I laugh because, Megan has come to work with me sometimes. Um, and she goes to his meetings sometimes when I have to work late. So she's getting a taste of both sides. And we said, you know what? She's going to be so not political. She gets off because she's going to say, you know what? I don't want this. But it's difficult, and I mean we do have some spirited discussions, and it is challenging at times. But listen, my mother always said, if you can help somebody, help them. And and I want to thank you all for being out there, being essential workers. It's difficult, and what we do is we fight to make sure that the city recognizes you all, that you're out there. They mentioned police, firefighters, our EMTs are out there, our school food people are out there, the TLC inspectors are out there. All of them provide critical components. We even have people still doing DP work up at the sewers, making sure sewers are still running. Because could you imagine flushing toilets doesn't work? I mean, these are things that people take advantage of every day. And if we don't have the people out there working all the time, the infrastructure is going to fall apart. And I want to thank everybody out there, who came to the call when the mayor said they're essential. You need to go out there. So again, my mom always said, if you can help somebody, help them. I don't need to be thanked, but I appreciate it, Liam. As long as the members are happy, satisfied, and their families, get the benefits that you all deserve, that's what I'm here for. And again, it doesn't matter if the local has 1 member, the local has 25,000 members. I take calls from everybody. I take calls from the presidents. If they're calling me 9, 10 o'clock at night, obviously there's a reason. They're not calling to chat. They're calling, there's an issue, I got a text last night from a president that said, listen, there's something on the horizon. I need you to look into this. And then I hit the papers and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. So, I made some phone calls and I said, listen, how people do that? You don't need to hire additional people. You don't need to have other workers doing our job. So they were like, oh, this is great. We didn't know that. So my job is to kind of be like the traffic enforcement officer saying, whoa, you need to slow down on this, but yet you need to, increase this. So that it's a balancing act because sometimes issues do conflict between locals. But again, that's what we're there for. We're there to mediate and to make sure all of our members get a fair shake. So it's very important that all of our members get recognized. And Henry is out there every day saying, listen, our people are out there too. You need to thank them and you need to recognize them. And that's why these federal dollars need to come, because people are suffering, and they need to get relief. And the city and state can't provide it. It's only the federal government is able to provide it. And hopefully, again, we're calling on our members, and I may be ahead of myself, but we will be reaching out to our members. There is a congressional letter out there signed by all our local presidents urging them for the next stimulus package to get more aid to localities. So, programs won't be cut and that our members can continue doing the work that they're doing right now. So thank you for the opportunity to get that out there.
Thank you. And that was a great note to finish on. And again, I want to thank you for your time. And that was a great interview. Thank you very much. And it was good hearing from you again. So
thanks, Liam.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. If you have any follow-up, let me know.
I will. I'll email you anything. And I'm sure my class and professor and everyone else is going to really enjoy this as much as I did. So thank you.
Say hi to everyone.
I will. Say hello.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I will. Bye.
Bye-bye.